SosKaid stood atop the hastily reinforced wall of the small town of NuArk. The freshly oiled wooden stock of her newly acquired hunting rifle felt right in her hands. She scanned the darkening horizon for any signs of movement, any hulking silhouettes, but all was still. There was a cool breeze coaxing small puffs of dust from the barren landscape and the chirps of a few particularly resilient insects, but nothing else. The usually buzzing marketplace to her back was empty, the iron taste of tension and held breaths in the air. Mr. Sandman. Hello and welcome back to A Wasteland Story. In the last episode of the show, our plucky heroine SosKaid finally managed to get out of that damn West Tech facility building and away from the watchful eye of the Brotherhood and the smelly underarms of the super mutants. She found a map with the letters FEV written in worryingly bold red letters, learned that a band of super mutants planned to attack a nearby settlement, met an oddly attractive but very bad man raider under a bridge and shot him in the face, but she did feel bad about it. Now our story continues in the small settlement of NuArk, where SosKaid met the young charismatic leader and had to convince the town to prepare their defences for an imminent mutant attack.
Bring us a dream, give him a pair of eyes with a comforting gleam, give him a lonely heart like Pagliacci.
Her back ached. Her hands rubbed raw from the preparations. She had no idea if the work would be enough. Perhaps they wouldn't come tonight. Perhaps there would be more time to prepare after all. Perhaps they wouldn't even come. Maybe they accidentally wiped each other out over an argument, or the Brotherhood intercepted them. These were not helpful thoughts, she realized, and she turned her attention back to the job at hand. She slid the bolt back on her rifle, feeling the smooth action, checking for a countless time that the bullet was sitting snugly in the chamber, that it felt and sounded just right. Reassured, she settled back into the methodical scanning of the small rise to the south. Waiting for the inevitable attack to come, she thought back to the events of the day. Okay, so we're back with SosKaid. She's just gone into NuArk, which is a small settlement. Off mic, we did a little bit of trading. We just traded in some of the stuff we found back in the facility. I ended up actually getting rid of a few things. I thought it was a bit strange that she had 4 sets of armor on her and that kind of thing. And I figured since we're scaling back anyway, because we're playing one character, I sort of scaled it back to so she found 1 piece of armor, which she traded in. We got some food, water, and a heavy coat, which is cool. It's like a trench coat, which means she'll get a bit of help when it comes to endurance checks outside due to the weather. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon. The cool breeze turned into the slightest of chills. SosKaid was grateful for the heavy coat she'd managed to trade for when she'd arrived. It fitted her perfectly, snug over her vault suit, rugged but cut in such a way that it allowed her a surprising amount of freedom of movement. And it had pockets, lots of pockets. Now I also rolled up this NPC that's non-player character for the new initiates who are still untainted by the murky world of RPGs, who's leading the village here. His name's Riley. E-H-A, Ear. He's young, he's got glasses, and I think his dad used to run the settlement, or was someone prominent in there and died, and for some reason, I'm not sure why yet, this young, friendly, ambitious kid has sort of taken over running things. Mr. Riley, although he insisted on being called by his first name Aya, Mr. Riley was my father, had been his response, had taken SosKaid's warning of the super mutant attack seriously right away. This had struck her as a little odd. Naivety generally spelt dead in the wasteland, but she was relieved all the same. Perhaps he just didn't want to take any risks since he had such big plans for NuArk. And he really wants NuArk to become like the next trading hub of the area. SosKaid knew that she didn't have to help out. She could have just warned them, negotiated some supplies, and moved on. It would still have left them in a better position than not, but something had made her want to stay. Perhaps it was Aya's earnest face and charming smile. Perhaps it was because she'd been so helpless in the face of the attack on her own village. Or perhaps she was already just tired of running. Maybe she didn't need to go north. Maybe she could stay here, a while at least, in the relative safety of NuArk. It was a big relative, though. The other thing that happened is that while she was doing her trading, we had a random event where SosKaid had these loaded casino dice, which were a trinket from her father. So not only can she use them to cheat, but she can look at it to have a memory and regain some luck. It's like a lucky charm. And she was pickpocketed while she was trading, and she did a perception check, and she didn't notice anything was stolen from her, but she did notice some children looking dodgy, and they seemed to be reporting back to an older gentleman with a monocle and a vest. There's no time to investigate that just now because we have the pressing issue of an unknown number of super mutants coming to attack. I think they're going to attack in between 1 and 3 days' time. And I think each day I'm going to see if they arrive, and that'll tell us how much time we have to build up defenses, that kind of thing. So SosKaid's talking to this leader, Ea, and she's explaining the situation, and he is on board for defending the place. He asks her if she's going to help, and she says yes, she'll help. She doesn't want to see the town taken out like her village was, and she wants to help them get prepared as much as possible. The settlement has some defenses, at least it has sort of some makeshift walls and things, as we said, but it's not super well defended. She had noticed coming in that the walls were quite poorly erected, more of an idea of place and safety than any actual defense. Aya had taken her around to have a look at the state of things and advise what else could be done. My father was more in the business of business and not so much defense. As luck would have it, we haven't really needed much defense up to this point, said Ea, but he did have the good grace to look a little embarrassed. But you are clearly a travelled survivor of the wastes. With your help, we might just stand a chance. SosKaid hadn't corrected him to say that she was a fraud, just a frightened little girl with no other options and no one to look out for her. But her silence and unmoving expression seemed to convince him of his own assumptions, so she'd left it at that. Besides, after taking the tour, she had gotten some ideas about how they could perhaps swing the odds a little in their favour. So I'm thinking maybe we can set up some pit traps if there's time. We're going to set up like snipers and stuff on the rooftop, depending how many people we can get to help out. The settlement had already had walls when SosKaid arrived. I mean, walls being pretty generous. Really, it was just thin sheets of metal nailed onto anything that was standing vertically and a rough formation of a perimeter. The roof of an old diner had been incorporated into the walls along with some dead cars that had once been scattered around the place. Now, though, filling most of the gaps were torn pieces of fabric, netting and mattresses, not equipped for stopping anyone getting in or out, but hopefully could help lead the eye of a not-too-bright mutant toward the open entrance of the town. And I want to see if there's anyone in the village who knows anything about explosives. I think I'm going to say it's likely. So we're even going to say that it's very likely that in this town someone knows about explosives. It's a trading hub. Those kind of materials are going to be available. So let's roll here. We have 53, which means yes, there is someone in town who knows about explosives. Aya had not been particularly on board with the idea. He seemed to have wanted to turn NuArk into a bomb shelter overnight, lock the doors and wait for the creatures to get bored and go away, not present them with an open gateway. But he was smart enough to realise that that wasn't really a reasonable goal. Let's find out who this person is. I think it's an old tinkerer. His name is P.I. Let's say he's Harry Eilish. No relation to Billie Eilish. So Harry, old man Harry, he knows a thing or two about explosives. And I wanted to maybe craft some frag mines that we could sort of put up around the perimeter. I think that'll make for an interesting encounter. The local tinkerer had been reluctant at first to use precious materials for the explicit purpose of blowing them into tiny pieces, but he relented when Aya had put quite a fine point on what the alternative just might be. Now Saskia doesn't know how to do that because you need the demolitions perk to be able to do it. But I think that because we have this guy here who knows about it, and because she's come in willing to help the town, that he's going to teach her to do it, and they're going to make them together. The tinkerer had started clearing space on a crowded workbench and sorting various types of junk into one bin or another. SosKaid had turned to Aya, who was looking at her expectantly. It had been a strange feeling, realizing he was awaiting some kind of instruction, from her no less. From the doorway to the workshop, she surveyed the area. "We need to fill those gaps in the walls with anything you can find. It doesn't even need to be solid," she'd said half to herself. Okay," Aya had replied. He made a note of the instruction on a somewhat superfluous clipboard. "Rig some standing platforms up on those walls, flanking the entrance?" SosKaid shaded her eyes slightly as she looked across the top of the disconnected pieces of wall. "Platforms, yes," was his response. "And round up whoever can handle a rifle and get them down somewhere for some target practice. And when we're finished here, they can bring me the weapons and I'll check them." Gaps, platforms, target practice, weapons. Got it. Aya looked up again at SosKaid expectantly for a few moments. When she said nothing, he muttered, "Yes, right, okay," and walked off towards the gathering crowd in the marketplace, looking down at his clipboard and muttering to himself. "Ready when you are, miss?" came the gruff voice of the tinkerer from inside the workshop. SosKaid turned and joined him at the workbench. I'm going to say if she spends 6 hours with this guy, let's see, she does have explosives tagged. So let's see if she can do intelligence and explosives, which would be 8. And we're just going to see that if she's smart enough to figure out what he's showing her here. It's going to be a difficulty 1, and we have 8 as a thing. So we're going to see if she can figure it out. If she can, they're going to be able to make more explosive. I think in the 6 hours or so, in the half a day, which was all we're going to commit to it, I think he can make probably 5, and I think we can make an additional 3 if SosKaid can help, and she's going to get that demolitionist perk. So let's see if she can do that. It'll be 8 tagged. And we have a 4, so we have the 1 success, so that's excellent. Time had disappeared for SosKaid as she slipped into the flow state of concentration and fascination. One of her earliest memories was sitting cross-legged on her father's workbench, handing him various screws and tools as he worked on devices, weapons, and gadgets. In her reverie, she could smell the oil on her father's hands as he had picked her up under the arms with an exaggerated grunt, put her on the floor, and told her to run off to see what her mother was doing every time one of his old friend, or comrades as he called them, came to his workshop for a hushed discussion. So SosKaid spends 6 hours with this guy and helping him build it, and as they're doing it, she learns the kind of materials you need, she learns how to put them together, and she's going to get the perk Demolitionist. So most RPGs have some sort of leveling system. This allows the characters to feel like they're getting stronger and more capable, and adding to their repertoire of options that they can use when heading into battle or some other tricky situation. In Fallout, which will be no surprise to anyone who's played the video games, part of this power growth is represented in perks, which are little abilities or quirky things that your character can use to their advantage. In this situation, for example, a character needs to have a particular perk in order to craft explosives. It's another perk to be able to modify a weapon, something I'm really looking forward to, by the way, or to kick someone so hard in the fork that their head pops off. That's an exaggeration to prove a point, but I actually haven't read all the new perks that came with some of the supplements, so who knows. So she can now craft explosives, which is pretty cool, I think. So she spends that time doing that. I think she's going to earn some experience for doing it. Let's say she earns 10 experience points for doing that. That takes us up to 76, so we're getting close to our first level. Noticing for the first time the pang of hunger that must have been present all day, SosKaid looked up from their work. She could hear the shouts of some keen individual who must have taken it upon themselves to lead some basic weapons training. and the sound of scraping metal as people compiled their improvised instruments of defense on a table in the cleared yard. Let's say we've managed to find 5 people who are handy with a gun, and we'll say, have we found any more than 5? 63. So no. We only have 5 people who are willing to or capable enough to help defend the village. I feel like there's going to be between 3 and 5 super mutants coming in. We'll roll up on that. Because we know the direction they're coming from, and I don't feel like super mutants are really intelligent enough to strategize about how they're going to attack the settlement. So we sort of know the direction they're coming from, and we're going to space out. So we had 8 then explosives. We're going to space out the 8 explosives across the front of the, in the direction that the things are coming, including 2 right at the front gate. As the sun lazily picked its way through the murky irradiated sky, SosKaid had set and covered the last of the mines they were able to craft. It was a gamble, for sure, to put all of their defences in the one place. What if the mutants were smarter than she gave them credit for, or more likely, they just stumbled in from another direction entirely? She shook the doubt from her mind. It had to be all in if they were going to survive. Hopefully the attack wouldn't come tonight, and they'd have time to dig some pits, further helping funnel their enemies into the trap. But if not, at least they'd made a start. Let's say there's 5 sort of fanned out in front of, like 20 meters back from the front gate, and then 3 right at the front gate. Carefully zigzagging through the safe path of the small minefield, SosKaid looked at the makeshift walls and the clearly open entrance. It had to work. It just had to. So, I think that's taken the rest of the day. The other thing they're going to do is collect all their ammo and weapons, set things up along the top of the walls. They're going to carry up some crates and bits of wood and stuff and sort of make a bit more cover on top of the walls so that the people shooting will be in partial cover. Let's say they're going to attack in the evening. So it's going to be either this evening, the next evening, or the following evening. Do they attack this evening? I'm going to put it at 50-50. Do they attack this evening? SosKaid checked the action of her rifle again. She looked up at the others perched on the various platforms atop the rickety walls. A few of them were watching her nervously and inexpertly attempting to check their own weapons. Why they all seemed to think she was so capable was beyond her. She attempted a reassuring nod, but she didn't think it was very convincing. There. Her head snapped up to the horizon. Was that movement? 32. They do attack this evening. Okay. Maybe it was nothing, she thought as she became very aware of the grain of the wood on the rifle in her hands. Everything was still as she strained her eyes against the darkening sky. Everyone's up on the walls. Everyone's ready. They have supplies and stuff from the merchants. Everyone who lives here is really, they like this town and they want to defend it. SosKaid looked around at the others on the wall. She fancied that she could taste the confusing mix of fear and determination in the air. She didn't turn as she heard Aya climb up to the platform behind her. "Is this it?" he whispered, the disbelief apparent in his voice. Army descriptors, okay? So we're going to have a 13, so calm, and disorganized. Well, this is nice. So these super mutants really think that they're going to stroll in and take the place. Are there more than 3? 50-50? No, there are more than 3. Aya's question was promptly answered by the distant booming voice of a super mutant.
No, that wasn't the deal,
came the voice as 3 loping silhouettes arose over the horizon.
If I kill a squishy, I get to keep it. This isn't a democracy.
SosKaid sighted down her rifle and again gauged the range that they were at as she tried to assess what they were dealing with. Yes, this is it, she whispered. So we have 3 super mutants, but they're pretty heavily armoured. Let's have a normal super mutant. Then we have a brute. And then we have a suicider. Thankfully, it looked like there were only 3 of them. It could have been a lot worse, but on the other hand, she knew that if they got inside the walls, they could wreak a lot of havoc before they fell. Then, She noticed the ominous flashing red light of a likely explosive glow periodically in the smaller mutant's hands. A happy beeping sound rang out, and the mutant with the bomb roared,
"Huh, there'll be nothing left once I'm done with them."
The suicider broke into a run, laughing all the way. The suicider starts running, because that's their job. The brute is heading up, he's the tough guy.
"No, you don't!"
bellowed the brute, and he took off after his giggling rival. Everyone on the wall stood motionless. SosKaid realised that she too was waiting for someone, anyone, to give an instruction. She took a deep breath. "Ready?" she roared at the top of her lungs. She felt the atmosphere transform around her as something shifted in the various civilians, and they jumped into action. "Ready?" came the shouts back, and their various weapons were raised at the oncoming threat. "Wait!" SosKaid consciously stopped herself, holding her breath as she watched the brute overtake the mutant with the bomb. He was heading straight for one of the mines. And we're going to see if he notices any of the mines. So he has a perception of 5. So difficulty 2, does he spot the first mine? He does not. She watched as he thumped closer and closer to the inconspicuous little mound of dirt that she prayed was going to function as intended. They hadn't had the time or resources to test the mines after all. The mutant stepped onto the mound of dirt, and she swore she could hear the click. So he runs into the first mine, and that is going to... Explosives. So Frag Grenade's going to do 6 dice of damage. So he steps right on this mine. So he's going to only take 1 damage from the explosives. That's unfortunate. There was a sound, but it was more of a fizz than an explosion. A spray of dirt was thrown into the air along with the hapless mutant. He hit the ground but immediately got up again, looking more surprised than angry than hurt. He growled, "I'm gonna cut you all up into tiny squishy pieces, you squishies." So I think they're probably about 20 meters out. He's been blown up, but not very hurt, and he sort of keeps pushing through, and he's now between the first line of mine defense and the ones at the door. The mutant made a beeline for the door, club in hand. He started laughing again. Ha ha ha. These mutants were clearly insane and showed absolutely no sign of fear. Then we have the bruiser. He's going to go. Is the bruiser smart enough to follow the path of the guy who just cleared a mine? Let's see how smart. So he has an intelligence of 4, difficulty 1. Is he smart enough? The second mutant stopped in his tracks when his green comrade flew through the air. He gritted his teeth, the mental load of thought clear on his face. 2, he is. He's smart enough to follow the guy and not step on the mine. So he doesn't step on the mine, and he is going to stop once the explosion happens, and he's going to take a shot. Mutie number 2 grinned, clearly impressed with his own intellectual brilliance, and lazily lifted the rifle to his shoulder with one hand, pointing it directly at one of the terrified civilians on the wall. So he's taking a shot with his bolt-action rifle, agility and small guns, which is 8. He's taking a shot at number 4. Let's say they have 1 defense. And he hits. Moments after the sound of rattling dirt from the slightly wet and disappointing explosion dissipated, the crack of a rifle filled the air. So he's going to do 5 dice damage to this guy. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this guy's standing up there and he takes a bullet to the chest or something, doesn't matter. He's still alive, but he's about half dead. At seemingly the same moment, there was a scream from SosKaid's left as she heard a body hit the floor. She forced herself not to look and kept aiming down her sights, but she was relieved to hear a groan coming from the fallen civilian. She took a second to reassess the situation. Her father's words came to her again. Breathe, think, fight smart, survive. Okay, SosKaid then yells out, take out the suicider. He's running with one of those beeping bombs if you ever played the game. The bomb! SosKaid yelled at the top of her lungs, all her typical shows of insecurity gone. Take him out before he gets too close! Everyone's freaked out. We want to see if he hears and understands. So he doesn't hear, and he just freaks out and he shoots the first guy he can see. So he's going to take a shot. The panic in the air was palpable.
SosKaid gritted her teeth as she glanced at her nearest companion. He was clearly not able to process anything and took a wild shot at the closest mutant.
With the pipe rifle, let's just ask if he hits. So I think it's likely that they hit. Let's call it a 50-50 if he hits. He hits.
A second shot rang out as the terrified civilian squeezed the trigger. Happily, the target was big and the brute stumbled briefly before continuing to push forward.
So he hits the super mutant with a pipe rifle, which is piercing damage. And he does 3 damage to the brute. Okay, next in line is going to be the suicide bomber, and he's just running. Yeah? So is he smart enough to follow the first 2 guys?
SosKaid forced her attention away from the first mutant, who was now dangerously close to the entrance. If he got in, he could easily spread death within the town's walls before anyone could take him down.
He is smart enough, so he follows the guys as well and doesn't then get blown up. And he's just going to run up.
Her focus snapped back to the flashing light of the third and most dangerous mutant. He was running at full tilt now, swerving to match the line of the other 2 that had gone before him. A few more seconds and he would be within range to throw his devastating explosive. She had to act now.
Then we have SosKaid's turn. Now she knows she's going to try and shoot the explosive that this guy has. She's going to do her sniper skill, aiming for that exact thing. She's going to aim, which means she can re-roll 1 dice. Agility and small guns gives us 12. Does she hit? Do we want to use an action point? Let's use an action point to try and hit.
As a reminder, spending an action point in this situation means SosKaid gets to roll an additional dice, improving her chances to hit. And because she took a minor action to aim, she'll also get to re-roll one of her now 3 dice. So, better odds.
Because if we can blow this guy up, then we are in really good form. Where's my rubber?
SosKaid knew this was it. She collected all of her focus and all of her calm and channeled it into her breath and into her trigger finger. She knew if she missed this, it might be game over.
And we're hitting on a 12 and it's tagged.
Her rifle tracked the flashing light of the mutant's bomb as he bolted ever closer to the entrance. She let her breath leave her body naturally and allowed her finger to follow. "Take cover!" she heard someone along the wall shout as she squeezed the trigger. The crack from her rifle and the whoomp of the explosion seemed to happen at the exact same instant.
Nice. So we get 2 successes there. She hits the bomb. Does the bomb explode? I think it's very likely the bomb explodes. 65% chance. It explodes. So she hits this bomb. How does this explosive work? A mini nuke. Shit. Okay.
There was a slight sucking sensation before the shockwave hit the thin walls. SosKaid hit the rickety platform she'd been standing on, the wind instantly knocked out of her. As she half-dangled over the inside edge of the wall, she saw the various mattresses and other pieces of furniture that had been plugging the gaps flick in lazy arcs towards the centre of the marketplace.
So the mini nuke... Where is a mini nuke? I don't know the damage. It's probably in a big gun. Big guns. Fat man. 21 damage. Okay.
The debris was followed by a few of the civilians from the wall, not quick enough to hit the deck, but they seemed to be more in shock than really hurt. As the platform stopped its recoil from the explosion, SosKaid clawed her way back to the ledge to survey the state of the mutants. If they were still coming, the civilians inside would be even more vulnerable than before.
So, I don't know what this radius is. Blast. Let's see what blast quality is. Target a zone, not a single enemy. Okay, so the brute is in the same zone. And it is going to do 21 damage. So that would be 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 damage to himself. Everything rattles. The guy just evaporates into bits of limbs and pieces of armor. The guy next to him gets thrown back. Does he get thrown onto a mine? He does. So the second guy, he gets blown up and lands straight on one of the mines, which obviously kills him. I mean, he just disintegrates.
As she peeked over the miraculously still standing wooden pallet atop the wall, she could see a faint pink and green mist rising from a small crater where the former suicider had been standing.
And he's also going to do half that damage to the guy next to him. So he's going to do 8 damage to the brute, taking him down to 2.
The brute that had been closest to the gate was lying face first in the dirt. Well, half of him was, she noticed with grim satisfaction.
Excellent. So this is a really good start.
SosKaid stood and roared, "Anyone still standing? Fire now! Drive these bastards out once and for all!" She felt an unfamiliar thrill, an uncharacteristic confidence. They could do it. Only one mutant left, and all of a sudden, he didn't seem so frightening. She saw 3 figures off to either side stand and aim. SosKaid herself trained the mutant in her sights. He seemed to be simply, for lack of a better word, dumbfounded at the obliteration of his comrades.
Now these next 3 are going to shoot at the same time, because that's easier. So let's say they have an extra die for successes, and they hit on a 9. So they hit.
Her confidence seemed to have spread to the others as the same realization dawned on them. They began firing at will at the suddenly lonely mutant on the borderline of their pipe rifle's effective range. She saw him shudder slightly as a handful of bullets met their target. She looked at his face. If she didn't know any better, she would have said he looked scared.
So they're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'll say 7 dice because there's 3 of them. They're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 damage. And he has a defense of resistance of 2. He takes 3 damage, so he's down to 9. My question is he going to keep coming or is he going to run?
The mutant seemed to be painfully slowly trying to make a decision as the citizens on the wall began reloading their rifles.
I think it's likely that he's going to run because he's the only one left, and he was smart enough to know that he should follow the guy who cleared a mine. So I think it's likely he's going to run. Will he run? 92, he will not run.
Seeming to have made it, his face changed to that of grim determination, and he raised his own weapon.
That was my brother, you bastards. No one kills Berg's brother but Berg.
He roared and pointed his weapon straight at SosKaid.
So he roars.
SosKaid saw the mutant's rifle narrow as she looked at it down the barrel of her own sights.
So she's going to take a shot at him now. We're going to aim again. I'm going to aim for his leg because I don't want him running away and telling more super mutants to come back.
She dropped her aim to the mutant's bulky knee. If she could get him on the ground now and disrupt his shot, they could finish him off before he lost his nerve and went back for reinforcements. It was risky, but it was an easier shot than his head, and he seemed to be able to take a few bullets to the chest without disrupting him too much.
And we have difficulty 1, small guns 12. She hits. In fact, there's 2 tags. That's a crit. So we gain 3 action points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is a critical hit in the leg.
Before the mutant was able to pull the trigger, SosKaid's rifle spoke once again. The hapless mutant's knee seemed to twist and splash like it was made of liquid. She heard his rifle return a retort as he fell to the ground, but there was no impact that SosKaid could tell. Thankfully, he'd squeezed too late.
And he immediately fall prones and it gives out under his weight. He can't sprint and the move is now a major action. Okay, so she does 5 damage to him. He soaks up 2. So it's 3 damage. He's down to 6. And then it's his turn. Will he try and run? I think now it is certain that he's going to try and run with a chaos of 2 to 3. So there's an 85% chance. Yes, he does try to run.
The mutant roared.
We will be back, and next time we bring everyone.
The mutant spat, turned, and began to limp away, back towards the direction they had come from. Limp is perhaps not the right word. The creature was using his good leg to drive himself forward, leap by leap, in a wonky sort of hop as his near-useless leg dragged behind. He was surprisingly fast, and having been the furthest away anyway, was already becoming a harder shot.
He gets up, he's crippled his leg, and he starts limping away. So he starts to limp away, and he's now getting long range from them, making him more difficult to hit. So let's see if our other guys can take a shot. We'll say 3 dice for them. We're going to say they need 2 successes at 8 to hit him.
Do not let him get away, SosKaid shouted. Bring him down! She heard the scraping sound of the others on the wall bringing their pipe rifles up to rest on the thin rusted sheet metal. A series of sporadic pops sounded.
And they don't get it. So they failed to do that.
The mutant had already gotten far enough away that he was out of their ideal range. She saw puffs of dirt spring up harmlessly around the retreating beast. They weren't leading their shots, she realized as she brought up her own weapon to take aim. It was up to her. She had one shot.
Then it's a new round. SosKaid gets another shot. He's limping away. She's going to try and hit him in the head because she really needs him to go down. Okay. She's going to use one of those action points. She really wants to make this hit. We've got 12 to get him, difficulty 2.
She aimed for the loping head of the mutant as he got closer to the small rise on the horizon. If he got over it, he would be gone. Short of running to catch up with him and further exposing themselves to more danger, he would likely make it back to his camp, and then who knew what the retribution might be. SosKaid started to feel the panic rise up in her chest that she realized must have been there the whole time. She let herself relax too soon. Let false confidence in. Stupid. And now it was all going to be for nothing. She pulled the trigger.
No, we do not succeed. I can re-roll 1. 13. No, we don't hit it. So she shoots at him and he misses.
As she squeezed, she felt her supporting arm jerk to the left. Shit. She'd been too tense. The mutant reached the top of the rise and was about to stumble down the other side, lost along with their peace and security, however temporary it was going to be.
The other guys start packing up because SosKaid's the only one a good enough shot to be able to hit him. So he gets a bit further away on his turn. And she's going to get one more shot before he gets away.
SosKaid pulled the bolt back on her rifle with a practiced hand, took another breath, and sighted at the mutant's head that was about to disappear behind the rise. This was it. Last chance. She fired.
And that's a hit. She gets the final shot in the head. It's tagged. So she has 1, 2, 3, 4 successes. So that's 2 action points she makes. And she hits him in the head and he falls dead.
The mutant had stopped for just a moment, turned its head back towards the settlement just before he got out of view. SosKaid could have sworn she saw a grin. It was his last mistake. The mutant's head snapped back and she saw his gun fly into the air. A larger puff of dust gave away the fate of the luckless mutant as he fell for the last time just beyond the ridge. The foot of his crippled leg, the only visible part of him, lay motionless atop the rise. They had done it.
That went surprisingly well. And happily, the guy didn't get away to be able to warn the other super mutants. So everyone cheers. SosKaid's the hero.
All SosKaid could hear was her breath, steady but elevated. She stayed frozen, staring down the sights of her hunting rifle still trained on the unmoving mutant. She didn't move. And then she became cognizant of another sound. As if the volume was being turned up slowly on an old radio, she became aware of the cheering. She blinked, looked up, and started as someone patted her on the back. An older man was standing behind her, his face wet. Before she could say anything, he pulled her into a rough embrace and lifted her small frame off the ground just for a second. She patted him on the back awkwardly and began to climb down the ladder.
And she's definitely going to get some experience for that. So she is going to take 38, 52, 45. There's 135 experience. That is excellent.
As she dismounted from the ladder and turned to the marketplace, she saw the crowd of locals gathered just on the inside of the entrance. There were women, children, and even the elderly all cheering with discarded tools of farming equipment on the dirt at their feet. Aya was with them with his arms crossed, smiling slightly. He must have organised every able body to defend the gate in case one got through. SosKaid looked at the meek crowd. It was a brave thought, but she was sure as hell relieved it hadn't come to that. It would have been a slaughter. On behalf of the proud town of NuArk, we thank you, Wastelander. Truly, he said in a loud official voice. Another cheer went up. She looked around shyly and managed a few meagre nods towards the crowd as she slung the rifle onto her shoulder.
So she's the saviour of the town. And I think that was classic Fallout behaviour. Shooting the mini nuke, blowing up half of them. So that is an excellent result. I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to go and do some bookkeeping. I'm going to level up. And then we're going to see what else is going on in this town.
The crowd started to slowly break apart as people collected themselves and equipment, hugged loved ones, and started heading off to do whatever they needed to do to return to their reality. The whole situation feeling a bit like a dream. As the crowd thinned, SosKaid noticed someone whom she hadn't seen before. A finely dressed, thin man with greasy hair, all in black, stood outside one of the buildings. She saw his eyes narrow slightly as she caught the stare that was boring into her skull. She looked away uncomfortably for a moment, and when she looked up again, she saw the door to the building slam shut. He was gone. Aya put a hand on her shoulder and she flinched, tearing her gaze away from the strangely heavy and sturdy-looking door. It was particularly out of place in this small, cobbled-together collection of modest dwellings. "Come," Aya said to her as he gently tugged her away from the strange building. "I'm sure you're exhausted and could do with a sleep." SosKaid nodded wearily at him and allowed herself to be led out of the marketplace. "Have something to eat, get a good sleep, and tomorrow there are a few things I would like to discuss with you." "Yes, of course," she replied. "Excellent," said Aya as he patted her on the shoulder. "I'll drop by in the morning if you don't mind." SosKaid nodded again and made off towards the small shack she'd been allowed to stay in the night before. "Oh, and SosKaid?" She turned with her hand on the fly screen door and saw that the young mayor was still standing there. "Yes?" "Thank you. Really." "You're welcome," she replied and stepped inside the tiny shack, sitting heavily on a small stool that was pulled up to a timber crate in the room. She winced as she took the rifle off her shoulder and lay it on the table. As she broke the weapon down and cleaned and inspected the various components, she let her tired mind tick over. They had done it. But they had been lucky. If more than 3 of the mutants had come, or if that suicider had have gotten in the gates, things would have turned out very differently. She reassembled her rifle and lay her belongings on the table. She picked up the map and touched her finger on the scrawled circle titled NuArk. There was something nagging at her, but she couldn't quite grasp it. The stare from that gentleman in black kept flashing in her mind's eye.
So she knows, based on looking at this map, she has a feeling that something really bad is going on with this FEV.
She traced her finger on the map over the fold to the faded circle labelled Outpost near the sprawling ancient city of Vancouver, sighed and folded the map up again.
I don't know how long it's going to take her to get up there. I actually think we're going to make 3 threads. We have the FEV thread, which is the long-term one. We have the reach the outpost. And I don't know what's happening yet, but I think there are lots of super mutants popping up. I don't know if anyone is doing it intentionally or if maybe there's just been a leak from the FEV. That's something that I think we can find out a little bit now that we're safe in this village and we can spend some time here.
She tucked it into her vault suit before stiffly laying down on the thin mattress in the corner of the room. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but as she lay there, she realized that for the first time since escaping her village, she actually felt a semblance of security. However short-lived it would inevitably turn out to be, and with that thought, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep.
So that was fun. I look forward to describing that later because I think that's a real classic sort of Fallout situation there. That's it. See you next time.
Thank you for joining me and our heroine SosKaid on A Wasteland Story. I'm super duper grateful to everyone who's reached out to me on Reddit or via email to say they're enjoying the show. I would totally keep doing this even if no one listened because it is a heap of fun. But knowing you're out there really makes it all the better. I want to give a particular shout out to the one fortunate or unfortunate individual, depending on how you look at it, who downloaded the last episode of the show in the 2 minutes it took me to realize that I'd accidentally included a good half hour of unedited tabletop play ramblings, not at all fit for human consumption, before I managed to fix and replace it. Well done, you are a super fan, and I'm sorry. Also, some of you'd said you'd love to not have to wait a whole month between episodes, and me too. At the moment, however, that's just about as fast as I can do it, and I'm not yet in the luxurious position of being ahead in my writing, enough or at all to do things any quicker. What I can do, however, which may be of particular interest to those already in the solo RPG community, is to not, in fact, tell you any specifics at all yet, but I'm working on something behind the scenes to put together some solo RPG-related adjacent content that could potentially come out between major story episodes. So for that, keep an eye out on your podcast feed or tune your Bakelite dial to Galaxy News Radio for breaking news updates. Please do check out the show notes for links and credits to all the wonderful music and sound effects that I use in the show, with a particular thanks to Enon Zur, Fallout Cascadia, and of course Modifius. Follow those links there to find all those things, and remember, in the words of the Overseer, you saved us, you are our hero, and now you have to leave. Bye. SosKaid jerked awake in the early hours of an otherwise quiet night to what she thought was the sound of an inhuman moan. Had she imagined it? She spent the rest of the night perched at the small table with her rifle in hand, waiting for something to happen, but the night had returned to its peaceful stillness. She watched the red light of dawn start to creep through the crooked slats in the shack window and began to collect her things. It must have been nothing, she said unconvincingly to herself. As the sun came up, she peered out between the slats and watched the young mayor make his way across the awakening marketplace. SosKaid swore she saw a tired worry outlined on his face before he concealed it behind his characteristic smile. As he took a creaky step onto the porch, she couldn't help but think that perhaps not all was well in the state of NuArk.